The Brothers Karamazov, Book 3, Chapter 7. Boy, Alyosha has had a difficult night. Remember, he's holding a letter in his hand and he's dreading going and seeing Katerina Ivanova because something about her is so creepy and disturbing. He really doesn't want to be alone with her. Then he gets cut off in the darkness by his brother Dmitri, and he has to listen to 3 chapters worth of Dmitri's drunken, madman, ranting, conflicted nature. Then he turns around and he has to go to his father's house, and now he walks in on a conversation between Fyodor, Smerdyakov, Grigory, and Ivan. And before 10 years ago, probably the entire history of men and dinner and humanity, before we all decided to just look at our phones, probably one of the greatest traditions of the world is men after dinner sitting around drinking alcohol and coffee and talking about a news story and joking and arguing about it. So it seems like that is commonplace for Fyodor and Grigory to do, and they're talking about the martyrdom of a Russian military man who has met a Muslim army, and he is called upon to renounce his faith or go to death, and the man bravely named the name of Christ and went to his death and was skinned alive for the cause of Christ. And so Fyodor, not caring words and truth are absolutely meaningless to him. Everything to Fyodor is just entertainment. He thinks this is a great topic of conversation, and so he engages Grigory about this issue, and now he's on the side of the Christians, saying that they should bring the man's skin back to the monastery. Of course, a crass and crude way of thinking about iconography in the Orthodox Church. No one is going to bring the skin of a human to display. And of course, Fyodor still thinks like a businessman and says, that would sure bring the tourism dollars, that would sure bring the money in. We don't really get Grigory's response to this, but we can only assume that he agrees, at least in principle, maybe not how he applies it. He at least agrees in principle with Fyodor at what a great hero this martyr of the Christian faith is. Smerdyakov, old Smelly, is smirking in the doorway, and who knows how much he believes what he's about to say, or how much of it is just to get under Grigory's skin. He says, no, that's stupid. This guy's no hero. What you do there, in that situation, if you're that guy, is you deny Christ. And so Smerdyakov is like so many freshman students I've had at the community college. I've taught an ethics class probably 22, 23 times. I've taught this introduction to ethics class, and without fail, with the around 30 students I have in each class, there's always one atheist, and it's almost always a young man who chooses to speak out about his atheism on nearly every ethical issue. And when it comes time at the end of the semester to do a presentation about something, they usually ignore the prompt, the rubric of the presentation, and instead talk about how Christianity isn't true and atheism is true instead. And usually, being young and having watched 1 or 2 Richard Dawkins videos on YouTube, usually the arguments aren't that great, aren't that cogent. And if you try to engage the student, you're trying to help them understand their own argument, and the student believes that you are arguing against them, and they don't even understand what they don't know because they are young and they're at a community college and they haven't been out in the real world, and they haven't had their lack of faith tested. They haven't doubted their doubt. They haven't engaged with any serious religious person and probably haven't engaged with any serious atheistic person. So that's Smerdyakov. He thinks that there's all these loopholes that Christians have never thought of. So he points out one of these loopholes. Again, maybe he's mostly serious, but maybe some of it is he's just trying to get at his adopted father, Grigory. And he says the loophole there is to deny Christ, because in the very moment you deny Christ, you're cut off from the church and you're not a Christian anymore. And if you're not a Christian anymore, how can God judge you for Christian things? He can't. So he thinks he's found some technicality or loophole, and he just has terrible theology, just like in the last chapter as a little boy, talking about the creation days, not realizing that the creation days all correspond like that. The first 3 days correspond to the second 3 days, light and sun, days 1 and 4, and sky and water, days 2 and 5 correspond with birds and fish. Land in day 3 and day 6 correspond with mammals and humans, not understanding the high prose that is poetry of Genesis 1. Instead, reading Genesis 1 as some sort of scientific manuscript of how creation was created. He thinks he's found all these loopholes. He thinks he's bringing up something that Christians for thousands of years weren't already aware of. And so anyway, trying to make his dad mad, he says, what you do there is you deny Christ, but you can't be judged by God for denying Christ because you're not a Christian. Fyodor just laughs and laughs at how stupid this is. So Fyodor is no devout believer, but he's a lot smarter than he lets on, and he just laughs and laughs at how stupid this is. He knows it's stupid, but he also doesn't care about the issue at all. He doesn't care about truth. So he laughs because now he's got a good conversation going. He knows Grigory is mad, and he knows Alyosha cares about this stuff, and he's just walked in the door. And he also knows that his brilliant atheist son, Ivan, is there. And so Fyodor is totally up for this entertainment. Fyodor also is not as stupid emotionally or relationally as he lets on, and so he kind of figures out what's going on. On the one hand, Smerdyakov may believe some of this, and on the other hand, he may be trying to make Grigory mad. But what he's really doing is he's really laying it on thick to try to impress Ivan. He's saying things and making eye contact with Ivan to try to get him to nod and agree with him. So he's got all sorts of lame logic that doesn't really hold together. He cobbles together these scriptures that he obviously doesn't understand, and he says, look, no one has real faith anyway, because Jesus says if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you could look at a mountain and throw it into the sea. And he's saying the most faithful people I know can't even move a river in our town, much less a mountain. Again, Smerdyakov completely unaware of the context of Jesus saying that. He's looking at the temple when in the book of Matthew when Jesus makes that proclamation. He's looking at the temple and he's talking about the whole sacrificial system of temple worship can be thrown into the sea. As compared with faith in Jesus Christ. In other words, it's a statement about the superiority of Christ to the Temple Mount. It's not a statement, it's not some wild health, wealth, and prosperity that just some guy mustering up the faith of a mustard seed all of a sudden is going to have supernatural powers. In other words, this is a grotesque version of a real, legitimate Christian atheist argument, and Smerdyakov is just cobbling together with bad thought, with bad theology, with bad philosophy, with bad knowledge of the history of intellectual banter. Smerdyakov is just cobbling all these things together, and he says, besides, all you have to do to be saved from God's judgment is just utter a quick prayer, and you'll be saved. So I'm not really worried about being judged. I can jump in and out of the faith on these technicalities, and through these loopholes, I'm going to win. And because of God's cheap grace, I know that I'll just be able to utter a prayer on the last day, and everything is going to be okay if I just have the faith of a mustard seed. And so I think what Dostoevsky is doing in this chapter is, yet again, he's making an alter ego for Ivan. Here is Ivan's sort of distorted double. He's taking Ivan's real intellectual arguments against the Christian faith, and he's just making them really base and grotesque, and maybe is even taking some of them to their more unseemly logical conclusions. He's just putting in a really base, seamy kind of way Ivan's elevated and academic way. Now, I don't think that this is parody. I don't think that Dostoevsky is satirizing unbelief at all. I think that he's saying something much more profound. I think he's making a societal observation and then a societal statement. And I think what he's saying is, as Dostoevsky looked around Russia and sees that hordes, scores of the populace in Russia were Fyodors, people who were living for pleasure, who had no concern for truth. And he looked at that and said that is Russia's problem. And one possible solution are a young intelligentsia who are contemplative and rational like Ivan. And I don't think those people scared Dostoevsky so much. What scared Dostoevsky so much is the peasant class, those who were exposed to some of the contemplative ideas, and those who wanted to look cool in the eyes of people like Ivan. And so the old John Donne saying that a little learning is a dangerous thing is, I think, what Dostoevsky is doing in this chapter. He's saying that people like Ivan, their person is not dangerous. What's dangerous are their ideas. Academic elite tend to alter the way the peasant class think. And so anyone who just rises a little bit and sort of maybe starts to understand a little bit of contemplative, rational argumentation is going to be swayed. And at the minute they're swayed, they're going to feel that they have an intellectual superiority to the peasants who are believers. And so Dostoevsky, through the character of Smerdyakov, is not just parodying the beliefs of Ivan, and he's not just doubling the beliefs of Ivan. He's saying this is the scariest version to him of the beliefs of Ivan. That it's going to come, it's going to flow down, it's going to trickle down to people like Smerdyakov, who don't have the tools, who don't have a liberal arts education, who are not able to discern good arguments from bad arguments, who are not critical thinkers, who are not self-critical thinkers. And then you're just going to have people parroting dangerous ideas like Ivan's, who don't have the intellectual capacity to know the limits and the arguments against those ideas.